Welcome to Shit Creek Survivors, where we share stories of resilience and the tools to build it. In this episode, we sit down with poet and author Aaron Poochigian to talk about addiction, recovery, and the healing power of nature. Aaron shares how Central Park, forest bathing, and writing his new book helped him reconnect with life and find peace through vulnerability, community, and reflecting on healing. We explore how slowing down and grounding ourselves, sharing our stories, can lead to growth and transformation. This is Shit Creek Survivors, and today we're finding solace in Central Park.
Yeah.
Very well.
And I'm wearing my New York shirt. I hope you don't mind.
Love
I was there 2 weeks ago. My wife is based out of New York, so I got to kind of hang around Times Square. That was my first time, which was quite a feat, having PTSD and not liking people around me. So it was also like a way to kind of grow. But I did get to walk through Central Park at part of it. It is beautiful. I didn't know what to expect when I got there because I've been to many parks, and I've been to city parks, but Central Park is alive. It is just so much going on all the time. There's so many little pockets of stuff. I only explored maybe a tenth of the park. You know what I mean? But I'm interested to hear because we're so open to learning new tools for the tool belt. And some of the things that I noticed that you were able to do is you leaned into writing and you leaned into walks in the park as a way of meditating. Is that correct? And so what I really want to hear about is, kind of your story, maybe let's hear a little bit about the addiction, because people can relate to that. There's people kind of hiding out there who aren't really dealing with their issues, but they're ashamed of it. So we try to talk about that stuff and be vulnerable. And that way other people can kind of secretly grab onto it and learn from it. And hopefully it changes their life. And when it does, they'll turn it over to somebody else. So your work will keep going. So yeah, I mean, if that all makes sense to you, I would just love for you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your history, and then we'll kind of get into your Shit Creek. And then we can talk about the tools you learned, and I'll ask a couple questions if we need them. Kind of like, what is forest bathing? Because I actually want to know what that is.
I love the term. It just sounds
Absolutely. And there is power in nature too. There is. I know it when I get out there and I just make myself ground myself out there. You're not the only person I've heard of, whether you're an addict, whether you're suffering from something, you've been through a traumatic situation, there's power to writing it down. And I want to hear about that. Aaron, who is a poet, classic scholar, translator, and former cocaine addict, craved peace and inspiration after isolation from the pandemic. And he found it in Central Park, New York, which is kind of shocking to me. I really want to hear how that worked. From famous landmarks to hidden wilds, the park offered Aaron a chance to meditate while moving, bathe in its piece of its vegetated green spaces, and find connection. And then what he did is to celebrate this urban treasure, and he actually created a friendly guidebook, a book which he's got coming out is it coming out right now, or has it come out?
It came out on the 9th of September.
Came out on the 9th of September. So what an honor to have you on, and we get to share the good news. So yeah, you looks like you've done a lot of cool stuff, and I'd love to hear all about it. But just so we can catch up on, Aaron, who are you? What's your story?
I define myself as a poet. It was hard for me for a number of years to be able to say that with a straight face, because people have curious reactions when you say I'm a poet. Usually they ask, how do you make any money then? But I've come to terms with it. Since I was 18, when I was 18, I describe it as a religious experience. I was looking at the opening of a poem in Latin. I didn't know Latin, but I sounded the words out. Arma virumque cano Troiae qui primus aboris. You can tell, I know. And I was like, oh, I want to be able to do that. And so it became clear to me at that moment that I was supposed to be a poet, and I was supposed to learn ancient Greek and Latin. And so I'd never really had a time in my life when I was unsure of what I wanted to do with it. For better or worse, and for richer or poorer, and usually for poorer, I've just pursued being a poet. Part of that involved, I got a PhD in classics because I wanted to know ancient poetry. And it's become, one of the ways that I get employment. now and again. But I pursued being a poet since I was 18. I'm proudly saying that now. That's what I am. I'm a poet.
Own
I
it.
also, yes, I translate ancient Greek and Latin poetry for like Penguin Classics and W. Norton. And then on
Wow.
occasion I teach, but mostly I write. If you want to know, yes, about my shit creek situations, since yes, I had emotional struggles starting from age 16. I was institutionalized a couple times in high school. Had been for several decades. Once I became a professor, it was kind of like joining the army. It's like where you're sent. I was sent to places where I was lonely. I knew I'd only be there for a year or two. And so I got in the habit of being lonely and depressed for years. But I've emerged from that, and I'm happy to talk about it. The
Right.
worst of it involving, the years when I was during COVID, when I became a pretty serious cocaine addict.
Mhm.
But yes, that's just the general background. I would be happy to talk about any of that and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
First off, who's your favorite poet from all this research that you did?
My favorite poet of all time is William Butler Yeats. He's
Okay.
an Irish poet from the late 19th century, early 20th century. And when I first discovered that, I just sat down and tried to memorize as much of it as I can. Um, and so now, and he's the one who's stuck with me most. I find myself going back to his work and finding depths in it, even though I've memorized. I'll reread poems I've memorized, and I still find further depths in them. And so, yes, he's my bright star, the one.
Okay.
I keep turning back to.
I used to carry a card in my wallet all the time from Ralph Waldo Emerson, the success one. I don't have it memorized, so I don't want to even try to butcher it. But it was
But no,
basically to leave the world a better place than you found it is to have succeeded. It was by a redeemed social condition or a healthy child or a fruitful garden. There's a bunch of other things, But I tried to live by those words too, and I dabbled with some poetry when I was younger myself as well. But yeah, I think COVID hurt a lot of us. We say this all the time. We're communal creatures. We're meant to be
Mhm.
up to be interacting with other humans, and isolation and alone adds to depression. Cameron went through a lot of that. I'm sure you did too. Um, what do you think then would be your biggest shit creek story to share?
I'll tell the addiction story.
Sounds good.
I had tried cocaine recreationally with friends in the past, just on occasion at parties when I'd visit my friends in San Francisco or in New York. And I'd always said to myself, I like this so much. It's good that I don't have regular access to it, because if I ever got regular access to it, I'd become addicted to it. And then, during lockdown in COVID, I was in my very, very small apartment in New York. They tend to be very small there. And I just felt like I needed something to get me out of the doldrums. I was trying to drown the COVID sorrows in work by writing. And so when I first sought out a dealer and got regular access to cocaine, I wanted to use it not to party, because there was no partying going on during COVID anyway. I
Right.
wanted to use it to work. I thought of it as a performance enhancing drug. It would allow me to disappear into writing for 16, 20 hours at a time. The consequence of that is that I just had no routine left in my life once I became an addict. Like I would work for 16, 20 hours straight, crash for a few hours, wake up at 10 p.m., eat my breakfast, and then do it all over again
Yeah.
and again and again. And I mean, my addiction stories are pretty much all the same, right? Like in the
Mhm.
beginning, the drug solves all your problems, and then you
Yeah.
need it to feel normal, and then you need it to keep from crying. I
Mhm.
cycled through all of that in about a year and a half time. Excuse me?
And you need more and more too. You keep feeding it. It's self-medicating.
Yes, you need higher doses. Yeah, it became very expensive. Whatever little
Yeah.
money I was making would go immediately towards cocaine. I was and in terms of the future, I had no plans other than coming up with ways to make more money in order to buy more cocaine. And so eventually when I realized that I had to stop, I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack.
Mhm.
I was approaching age 50, and a wise friend once told me that you don't do stimulants after age 50 because you could have a heart attack at any time. That was sage advice.
Was that the little thing that was said where you kind of started like looking at what you were doing and be like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? Or did you have kind of like an internal time clock? Like when I was drinking at my worst, I kind of knew I shouldn't be, but I didn't care. You know what I mean? So I was curious how that concept of maybe I shouldn't do this, was that something
Click.
internal that happened with you, or was that like an external source that told you something?
It was internal. I had that
Okay.
sage advice from a dear friend of mine, a rock and roll musician who'd done his share of drugs. He gave me that good advice, but it was when I started to feel it. I would do a line of cocaine and then I would say, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. And then 5 minutes later, I just do another line anyway.
Yeah.
And so yes, I didn't want to die and I could feel myself moving in that direction. And so I decided I needed to pull out of it some way. There's the isolation of COVID, but I'd isolated myself from my friends and my family because I didn't want them to see what had become of me.
Right.
I had acquired a bunch of habits and affectations involving my nose and nostrils because of all the cocaine I was doing. And so I didn't want anyone to see me in public. And I became even more isolated. But what really got me, because I'm concerned about my creative fertility. That is, I want
Mm.
the ideas to keep coming and the enthusiasm to stay there. And
Right.
towards the end of the time when I was using, the ideas stopped coming. I was sterile as an artist. The metaphor I use is I was like scouring the bottom of a pot to clean it, and it was already clean. And I just kept scratching and scratching, but there was
Right.
nothing more. There was nothing more I could get out of it. There was no more cleaning I could do. And so when I couldn't work any longer, the ideas dried up. That also stimulated me to, try something new. That I knew I had to radically change my life. And so I resolved to try this practice. I felt like I needed fresh experiences because my experience was limited to my very small apartment and the corner deli I'd walk to buy stuff.
Right.
I didn't go anywhere beyond that. And so Japanese, it's called Shinrin Yoku in Japanese. It's called forest bathing. That's how it translates. And it is just walking in the woods, but there's a greater focus, right? That
Yeah.
as you are walking through the woods, you very consciously and intentionally itemize each of the sensory experiences you're having. And
Oh
so
wow.
visual, olfactory for your nose, tactile, touching leaves and bark and feeling what the bark is like. And so I felt like I needed, for the sake of my poetry, to have more tactile, to have more sensory experiences because my experiences were so limited, as
Okay.
well as stimulating conversations. And so I very intentionally started going to Central Park for several hours a day, and slowly, yes, itemizing and keeping track of all my experiences. When I first started writing about it, there are different kinds of writing. There's
Mhm.
therapeutic writing you do for yourself.
Okay.
And some rehab programs include, journaling and writing diary entries. But that's writing you do for yourself. You don't intend to publish it. And
Right.
what became later on became my book started out that way. I would itemize and record my experiences, but also, apart from the Japanese forest bathing, we'll talk about how that works in Central Park in a second. I was also reading a lot about the park, and I was trying to become a naturalist. Like I, I, I didn't know anything about one tree from another. They were just trees
Me
or
neither.
species of birds. And so there was a study portion of my, sort of friendship with Central Park where I would bring guidebooks. There's one great guidebook that actually maps every single tree in Central Park and tells you to what species it belongs. And so I relied heavily on that. I would sit down, lean my back up against bark, and then slowly work through all the trees that were around me, their names, and then I do research on their characteristics. Bird species were good for that as well, like distinguishing the eastern bluebird from a blue jay.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell the difference in the beginning,
Yeah.
and now I can. And so there was that study portion that sort of gave greater depth to the experiences I was having there. And then I was, journaling mostly for, as I said, for therapeutic reasons, not with any intention to publish anything. And so my rule was that I couldn't do any drugs while I was in the park or while I was writing about the park. And
Gotcha.
fortunately, I became so excited about the Central Park project and all that I was learning about it, that ended up being most of my day. And so my drug use shrank and shrank, and eventually I stopped doing it entirely. There were some, of
Wow.
course, some relapses. I confess I'd lapse back into the old nasty old habit once in a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
But
Very
now,
human.
yeah, and the relapses are normal. The important thing I've heard
Yeah.
with the relapses is not just to give up and say, "Oh,
Mhm.
well, I'm done," and then just go back to using as much as you did before, just to
Exactly.
take
Right.
Staying
take the
positive.
relapses in stride. And so, yeah, I can say now, several years, I mean, I'm like 2 years into my recovery, I honestly don't want it any longer. And I think the moment I realized that I really didn't want it any longer, was when I was able to start smelling things again. Because of the I was
Oh.
inhaling my drugs, I had basically a permanent sinus infection for a year. I didn't breathe through my nostrils for a year and a half. I didn't
Oh,
have
wow.
any olfactory experiences. My nose was always so stuffed up.
Yeah.
And so I remember being in one of the sites near Bethesda Terrace it's an elaborate monumental site in the middle of the park, just northwest of there is Cherry Hill. And in the spring, there's a cherry blossom festival. There are Yoshino and Kwanzan cherry trees from Japan. And I was able to smell them. They have a sweet, like, almond taste. How almonds taste, that's how they smell. And I was
Okay.
able to appreciate that. And that was, yeah, persuaded me that I didn't want to go back to not being able to smell anything ever, as I'd been for a year and a half. And so, yeah, a couple years now, into my recovery, I have no desire to do that drug ever again, because
That's
I
awesome.
remember how closed off I was, how I couldn't smell anything. And but also because I worry about my, like, fertility for work, how it eventually just caused me to dry up and, yeah, not have any other experiences in my isolation.
Yeah, I didn't even
You
think
fully
about that.
immersed yourself into nature, and all that attention to detail probably really helped fine tune it. And I would say that probably helped get to a point where you're actually releasing dopamine while you're doing this project. And that natural drug can replace that artificial drug, that sense of purpose and then ideas of doing something. And things that you were saying about why you're forest bathing sound very similar to some of the grounding techniques that Cameron was just sharing on a couple episodes ago, where you try to, if you're having an anxiety attack, you could try to find 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch. What was it? I don't remember. I don't want to
Yeah,
butcher it, but
it
it
basically
was
just
very
works
similar to
through
that.
your sensory organs. You're using
Yeah,
smell, sight, touch, taste, and what you hear, and
yeah.
that
I love
practice
how
and what you
fully immersed you got into it as you were explaining it. That attention to detail is really remarkable.
Yeah,
yeah,
I saw it as the opposite of being high on cocaine. When I was on cocaine, I collapsed inwardly. I didn't have any new sensory experiences in my small apartment, and so I was entirely in my mind.
yeah,
And since I wasn't experiencing new things, it was kind of a sterile, repetitive, very
Yeah.
repetitive place to
yeah.
be.
Stuck in
And
your
so,
own
yeah,
mind is
I
not
like
the
those
place to
grounding
be.
techniques. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Being stuck in our own mind is not the place to be, I find usually. To be
No,
original.
it gets old really quick, right? The same thoughts tend to recycle. And so, yes, I'm excited to hear about that grounding technique. Yes, you're supposed to use it during a panic attack, for example. It's a kind of, you're distracting yourself from, yeah, your own anxieties.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're bringing yourself into the present because a lot of times when we're having a panic attack, we're either forecasting something that could potentially happen when it usually never really happens, or we're running over something from the past that we can't change. So both those places are very distressing. You know what I mean? If I'm always thinking about how it was unfair what happened to me and blah, 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 and I'm in a victim mentality, I'm not here. And if I'm anticipating that tomorrow is going to be terrible, I'm just going to be worrying about that the whole day and I'm not here. So the idea of sitting there, like you said, actually putting your back on the bark, feeling the bark, looking at the trees, seeing the trees, naming the trees, that
Touching the
it sounds
trees.
therapeutic just talking about it.
Yeah, it really
Like
does.
it makes you slow down. And nature does that. There's something about, and it's funny how I don't really dive into it. I should more, but you go play golf,
You
and
dig
one of the
golf
best
sometimes, yeah.
parts, yeah, one of the best parts about playing golf is you suddenly realize that you're outside in one of the prettiest areas that you've been. And you that
And
can just happen like at like the 10th hole. You're like, oh my gosh, I've been playing golf 9 holes. You know what I mean? But you've been so worried, or I've been so worried about this, that, and the other, that it doesn't allow me to really be there. And yeah, any relation to that, Aaron?
yeah, oh, yeah, very, very much. Yes. It's curious to do. I mean, some people have asked about they found it curious to do Japanese forest bathing in Central
Hmm.
Park because it's not a natural wilderness. It's an artificial wilderness that was built. I mean, apart from a few rock formations that stick up out of the topsoil, like the
Okay.
bedrock of Manhattan sticking up, those are natural. But most everything else in the park is man-made, is artificial. But I saw it as like nature concentrate. I mean, you certainly
Uh-huh.
get the same species of trees, the same species of animals that you get in a natural wilderness, but it's set up so that you can move from one environment to another. Yeah, just in a matter of 30 seconds to a minute, you can move to a new environment. I see it as like, yeah, like concentrated orange juice, concentrated nature
Yeah.
in Central Park. And so it worked. I mean, I'll say came naturally to me, yes, to see nature in the park. And it had the same effects as it would in a true wilderness.
Well, I think that definitely speaks to, well, one is not all of us heal the same way. We need different things, you needed that exact thing. Well, for another person, they might need another. And it's so cool listening to all these different tools for the tool belt. And we talk about meditation on here, and I struggle with meditation sometimes. I'm like, oh, when am I going to do it? And I get panicked about it. I try to block off the time and all this kinds of stuff. But it sounds like you were more living in it. You were actually allowing it to come into your everyday, like you were actually living in it, compared to like me being like, time out, I got to go meditate and trying to get as quiet as possible. You're actually kind of flowing with it. Does that make sense?
Yes. And it took a lot of self-correction, especially early on when I'd be in the park. My mind would wander and I'd realize, oh, I hadn't noticed anything around me for a good 5 minutes now. I need to
Right.
bring myself around. I'm very easily distracted and excitable, and my mind is slightly spastic. And so I had to, yeah,
I
I
can
was
relate to
harsher
that.
on myself. Yeah, and bringing myself back around. Eventually, yeah, it became second nature. Yeah, to just calm down and assess. That is a London plane tree, and and it has these colors right now in the fall,
Right.
and it's going to lose its leaves. And so that, yeah, it was good that way. The park went from being, in the beginning, it was a new friend full of surprises, and
Right.
I needed something to connect to. There's an addiction specialist named Johan Hari. His last name's Hari. And he says that the opposite of addiction isn't necessarily sobriety, even though that's what you're working towards. The opposite of addiction is connection, that
Um,
addicts become isolated and cut off. And that when you do give an addict social connections and a community to belong to, yes, recovery becomes that much easier. And so it took me a while before I started going back to people and cultivating like literal friend relationships.
yeah.
But the park was my new friend full of surprises. Now it's an old and reliable friend, but I think the park has infinite depths. Kind of like
Yeah.
we were talking about William Butler Yeats earlier, stays with me for my whole life, always has more to say to me. Yeah, the park it seems, has been working the same way in that, yeah, I've been going there regularly for years now. And I can
Mhm.
identify species pretty well, both of birds and trees, for example. But yeah, it seems to have infinite depth. There's always, yeah, more for me to appreciate in it.
Like a
It's
good
been a good
movie or a good book, sometimes when you rewatch it or reread it, you'll catch parts that you didn't catch the first time, or some of the meaningful parts will mean something different because of the new experiences you've had now that you've got grown older and gone through experiences. But
Mhm.
that's great that you have that old reliable friend that you keep going
yeah.
back to,
Let
and
me yeah,
that's
Let me
awesome.
ask you, gentlemen, I've found myself, I mean, I listen to new music and I watch new movies on occasion, but I find myself, now that I'm 52 now, wanting to go back, especially, I mean, to movies and songs and albums I knew when I was younger, far more than to take in new stuff. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but especially like the movies and music I liked when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I just find very soothing. I know them so well, like the albums, that I don't even really listen to them, but I get the energy from them and the
Right.
comfort
And what
from
energy
them.
do you get? You get comfortable, you get normal, you get knowing, you get relaxed. It's not, you're not trying to project potential problems or anxieties from the new movie, the new book, the new music.
Do you gentlemen do that
So
as
you
well?
don't
You
have
go
to
back to the
concentrate on
things?
it. I
You
do
go
it
back to
very
the
much
music?
so.
Yeah.
I've explained on here before that a lot of times the reason I drank so much was because a lot of my thoughts felt like you're going through 100 channels on the cable box, just a second at a time.
And
And it
not
would be
finding a
fun.
single thing you wanna watch.
Right.
Yeah.
So you drink and drink to slow that down and get it to turn off. But one good thing that I do with watching the older movies or older shows that I've seen before um, is that comfort level where I could kind of focus on it and slow down the channels in my brain, but I don't really have to focus on it so much because I already know what's going to happen. So I think it's
Hmm.
just a comfortable spot. I would say if that's all we do, it might be a problem because you never want to, put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Yeah.
Balance is key in everything. It's good to go back to the comfort, but you got to still expand your knowledge and go out and meet people and talk to people and have new experiences as well.
Well, what if the problem is that all the new movies are just terrible?
Well,
The
that too.
It's like, what did I just spend 2 hours doing? You're like, you don't walk away inspired, and you're like, okay,
I worry
and
about that. I mean, now that I'm getting older and when I do find a lot of contemporary music that does not speak to me,
right,
and that I don't like, but the kids
The
like,
grumpy old men on the porch. Get off
I'm
my
afraid,
lawn.
yeah, I feel like I'm just becoming a grumpy old man who, yeah, can't
Yeah.
appreciate what the kids are doing today. But I really do prefer the music and movies that I saw when I was in my teens or when I was younger. I really do prefer them. But I'm
yeah,
afraid, yes, I think that's just a natural generational process.
yeah,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would say we're
as
pretty
you get
normal.
older.
I remember my dad used to always watch older movies at night too. He'd watch some old black and white movies or John Wayne movies, and I remember that very vividly as well. And I just turned 53, so I also know what you're talking about, like getting in our 50s, and it's time to like, what's going on here? This everything seems a little bit different. You associate with things a little bit different. You got the old man wisdom now.
Do you think maybe we're like seeking calmer things than we used to? Like, it used to be about excitement and like, let's do the new thing, and now it's like, I don't need that. I don't need that stress. Just give me what I know. You know,
Yeah,
I'll even find that if I'm like actually stressed out, putting something that I know on TV, like The Office. I've seen every episode of The Office probably about 50 times. I can hear it and it'll actually calm me down, which probably isn't the best thing, but it works. I mean, it does
And
work.
sometimes you can say the lines in unison with the actor. Like, you know the lines that are coming up so well. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. What is the comfort and reassurance that comes from that? Just as you were saying, yeah, it
Yeah.
is comforting and soothing.
and it also might
And
remind us of some happy times when we watched it the first time as well.
Oh, when you, yeah.
yeah, I like watching stuff that's actually going to like end with a good lesson or something kind of nice, if you will. That's a really general way to say that. But even like Peter Griffin and Family Guy, he's the craziest person, but at the end of it, it usually ends with them being like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Lois." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and it's just super simple. It's just packaged, like, you know, it always ends up okay and all that kind of stuff. So when you watch it, you're never really anxious. It's just a lot of silliness, and you're like, whatever. My wife wondered for a long time why I watch Family Guy, because she's like, I don't get it. I'm like, you don't have to, it's just there. And then she's like, but it goes too fast. I'm like, that's the point. You can like watch 1 second of it and there's like 2 jokes, and then you could
Yeah.
blank out for 5 minutes, then come right back and there's, a bunch of stuff right there. Anyways, I won't get too off the rails.
No,
But
but everything works. Everything ends up working out in the end. The good people get what they deserve, and the bad people get what they deserve at the end of
right.
an episode.
And a lot
Yeah,
of movies have gotten really big on trying to surprise us by giving us the unhappy endings and stuff, trying to be, shocking and different than everything else. And I think it ends up working against us internally, just like even without, knowing it consciously.
Yeah.
Just, it's a negative vibe, and negativity breeds more negativity, and positivity breeds more positivity. So, and you
Maybe.
said something earlier about addiction, like the stories are all pretty universal.
yeah,
And I heard it one time, I think you might have even kind of said it a little bit. Somebody was saying addiction isn't a problem, it's actually a cure. So you're trying to cure yourself from something and you're using it to self-medicate. So what you
Yep.
got to do is replace it with something that's a healthier alternative that can relax you and bring you into that peace that you're getting from the harmful chemicals and harmful products.
Yeah.
And
yes.
it's tough to do. It's easy to say, but it's tough to do.
I've started running regularly, pretty seriously for exercise. And I read up on it, and you can get addicted to the dopamine that comes from running, but it's a healthy kind of addiction. And
Well,
it's been
balance there too. I wouldn't
so
say
good
run
for me.
10 miles
Yeah.
every day probably isn't as healthy, especially in our 50s. But yeah, you still balance it out. It's a much better dopamine addiction than cocaine would be.
Yeah. And it's
Definitely
relatively
not easier.
cheaper. It's a lot cheaper. And then it doesn't hurt you. You actually end up being better physically,
Yeah.
mentally. You have a
Running's
clear
the best
head. I think.
workout. You just go
Yeah.
outside and start running.
Yeah.
You don't have to belong
Yeah.
to a gym.
And I'd
Yeah.
imagine, like in New York City, there's something cool to see the whole run. It's not like running on a country road where there's nothing. It's like you're in New York City. You're going to see
I
some
think I
stuff
prefer
while
the
you're.
country road.
I usually jog along the river because
Cool.
otherwise the traffic gets in the way. But there
Right.
are, vistas along the East River and the Hudson River that I usually stick to. Otherwise, it can be kind of dangerous with all the traffic around.
Yeah.
I need to go to New York again. I haven't been there for a while. I went there. We went to Fort Dix before we went to Iraq, and then we got a weekend break before we left. So my wife came and saw me. We rented a car and went downtown, and it was right around Thanksgiving, so we got to see the parade. And then we went and ate at what's one of the really famous Italian restaurant?
Oh, I know a quality Italian. Yeah, up near the park. But
Yeah,
you had
I
a good
can't remember the
time. You had a
name.
good time.
Yeah, so I think our Thanksgiving dinner was Italian. We say we're going to start a new tradition. I don't think we stuck with it, but that's been 12 years ago now. So I need to get back there. I even got friends there. I should go to New York.
Yeah. We'll go
Let's
together.
plan a trip.
Yeah. We'll all meet there. It'll be great.
We'll do some
I'd be
forest
happy to have
bathing.
you.
Now, is there any tip or trick or something that you wish you would have known along the way? We could talk about addiction in regards to that, or getting sober, or however you may look at it. Anything that you kind of like, wow, that's powerful. I know you shared the power of, meditation while you're walking, and, the writing and everything like that. But to a person who's suffering out there right now, what would you say to them?
I'll share a realization I had fairly recently. I've been, more or less until recently, depressed, miserable in my life. And then I had the especially shit creek moment when I was addicted to cocaine. But what I realized lately, I used to be arrogant about my misery. That is, I felt that it was unique and special to me. It's what made me a unique individual. All of these problems, the universe afflicting me and singling me out for misery. And
Right.
so it made me impervious to rehab and to sharing my experiences with other people.
Yeah.
I had a sort of arrogance about my misery that, as I said, that made me special. And I realized that was a bunch of BS, right?
Mhm.
That in fact, there are many people who are far more miserable than I am and have it far rougher than I do, as I saw during my brief stint in rehab. But I just want to, and if people feel that way, that what's making them miserable is also what makes them special. I want to encourage them to make an effort to talk to other people about it, to listen to shows like this, and to share their stories with people who will share their stories in turn,
Yeah.
and realize it's not just that they're not alone, but that they're not unique.
Mm.
And so I've been much happier since I have not regarded my troubles in the past as defining me and making me a
Yeah.
special individual. And so I just want to again put in another big pitch for talking about your troubles with other people and realizing that they're not unique to you.
Would you say you were
That's
arrogant in your misery?
Yeah,
Or
I
you
was
arrogant in your
arrogant.
depression?
Yeah.
That's just like touched a nerve. That just spoke to me. I hope that
yeah,
speaks to somebody
that's
else too.
that's really well said, because for a long time with trauma, I know specifically me, it does define you. And for whatever reason, like after I got injured and everything like that, and I like lost my job, I really wanted to show it to people. I wanted to like, this is my story. Look at it. You know what I mean? And I wanted them to like basically confirm that I'm the hardest done to person in the world. But somewhere along the lines, I had to come out of that victim mentality, because I wasn't actually a victim. I was the person seeing myself in that situation. And then you eventually just have to start walking in the direction you want to go, although you might not even believe you'll ever get there. But that was really, really well said. That spoke to me too. That is awesome. I think that's
Arrogant
such a
and
good way to
confident.
see it. Yeah, and
widely used.
it does not define you. You know what I mean? Especially addiction. It does not define you. It's something that, for whatever reason you're struggling with an earthly pleasure, whatever it is. But most of the time, like Dennis said, it's distracting you from something else. So it's more the cure or the pause button that you keep pushing so you don't have to deal with the stuff that you don't want to deal with. But yeah,
But you
it
got
does
to,
not.
because trauma is like somebody pissing in your water, right? No matter
Yeah.
how much sugar you put in the water, you're still going to taste the piss. So you got to filter out, got to deal with the trauma.
I like that very much.
And the part about addiction is, to most people who don't know that feeling, who don't know what that is because they've experienced it, they think it's as simple as just like, if you're an alcoholic, just stop drinking. It's not, you don't have to be a genius, but you're not asking someone to give up, a drink. You're asking someone to give up something that's helping them feel better, or at least they believe is helping them feel better, or now they have to have to feel better. It becomes something bigger than it is. And it's hard when you're looking across the table from someone who isn't in that situation for them to empathize with you, because they don't know where you are. But when you get around like-minded people and you're willing to share your story and they're willing to hear your story and help, oh my gosh, that's where healing happens. Because suddenly you're like, oh, I'm allowed to talk about this. This is okay. Oh, you had something like this happen. Oh, you felt that way too. You felt stomped on, it.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's what is it? Company and misery. Is that what they say?
Misery loves company.
Yeah.
Misery loves
I think
company.
it might be
Yeah.
the saying. Yeah, the logic. Yeah, I learned a lot about myself, and also like the logic of addiction and how hard it is to quit, especially in the beginning. And that like every possible kind of day I had would all lead to the same thing. Like I had a great day. I want to go home and celebrate by doing cocaine. I had a really boring day. I want to go home and liven things up by doing cocaine. I had a miserable day. I want to go home and feel better by doing like in terms of the logical flow chart, everything leads to the same end, right? To you doing your drug. It took me so long to get out of that logic in which everything led to me going home and getting high and being alone. Yeah. And so, I credit Central Park. I'll give most of the credit to Central Park for my recovery.
You got to take some of the credit too, because you took the efforts and you tried, you succeeded, you failed, you tried again, you succeeded, you falter a little bit, but you keep trying. You kept trying. You were resilient.
Yeah.
And that's how you got through that. So.
And it looks like you learned so much that you went on to actually write it down, and now it's been published. So tell us about the book and why you wrote it, for what you were hoping to convey or pass along through the book to other people who might listen to it or read it. Sorry.
I was doing early on when visiting the park, I was doing a lot of writing about the park, but it was the therapeutic kind of writing.
Oh,
yeah, you were saying. That was for me and not yet for an audience, which is a different kind of writing. But it was giving me a great deal of pleasure writing about it and learning about the park. And I expected in the beginning to write a series of short pieces about Central Park, when I realized eventually that it was a book-length project. And that it was, in poetry, what we call didactic. It's a rare kind of poetry nowadays, poetry that's meant to teach things.
Okay.
And so it was, there was so much that I'd learned about the park. And in this case, it's different from other writing I'd done in the past, but it was all about sharing the solace, the sort of, the reassurance and comfort that the park gave to me with other people. And so, there are 4 walks, and they're sort of like guided meditations through the park. And I find that poetry lends itself to that, and that poetry is about capturing some essential detail. If it were in prose, there would be lots more information I would have given, but it was in verse. And so I was trying to capture the essence of the forest bathing experience. We were going through each of these sensory details and presenting them one by one, and they are what they are, but they also have significance beyond themselves, symbolic significance. And also, they have to do with getting oneself out of one's mind and out into the world. And so, the impetus for this project was to share the solace that the park gave me. And so it's
Yeah.
set up so that there's a speaker who's a tour guide. They call him the docent. He's a know-it-all, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, that speaker knows he's not me. He has some similarities to me, but he's even more knowledgeable about the park than I am, because I would have to look things up, right? But
Right.
the speaker in the poem, he knows it all. And
Okay.
then there's an addressee, a you, who is going through feeling isolated. It's not addiction that the you is going through, but how overwork and not getting out and enjoying life anymore. And
Yeah.
so the docent guides the you, the addressee, who's cut off from the world, out through these walks and back into an appreciation. I mean, ideally, I hope the book does this, an appreciation of being just being alive, of being able
Yeah.
to experience things again. That lesson, I'm the speaker is very confident and knowledgeable and sure of himself, but I, in reality, am nowhere near that confident or assured of myself. And so I need that encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still every day. I mean, I'm glad to say I'm sober, completely sober, but I need that reminder every day to appreciate my own experiences. It's so easy to get distracted, and people talk about temptations of technology. They say that it's harder to focus now than it was in the past because there are so many cheap and easy distractions. And I still find myself doing that, like my hand automatically going to my cell phone and checking things on my phone. And it's not even a conscious decision on my part. My hand and my attention just goes there and does that still.
Yeah.
Another
And
addiction.
so, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you do get a quick and easy sort of pleasure out of checking your cell phone over and over again. But I've tried now, when I go out in the evening, because I've been working a lot lately. When I go out, I want to talk to people. And so I've tried leaving my cell phone at home more often. And that's been helpful to me. But I get restless. My hand wants it to be there so that I can look up some dumb fact or just read the news. I don't know. But working on it. And so I'm still a work in in process. But the speaker in the poem,
Always are.
he's a master meditator. Yes, he knows the advice to give.
I think you're so right that there's so much stuff now that can be distracting because if you allow yourself to remember back when you were a kid, there's only a couple ways people get a hold of you. One was a letter in the mail. The other one was a phone call to the house phone. And then the other is they show up at your door, You
And it
didn't.
was even meeting friends was different. Like you had to accommodate for time. You didn't know if they were late or if they were still coming. But now we always know, and people can just say, 10 minutes late.
Instant gratification.
Yes. I miss that. I'm Gen X, and so I grew up in the generation, where we just would ride our bikes all day with latchkey kids. There was a lot, and it was. I do have some nostalgia for those pre-computer days.
Back in our day.
Yes, but again, yes, I'm sounding like a grumpy old man.
That's okay.
No.
Embrace it. Own it. It's okay.
We're being grumpy. We're being grumpy about it while we're using it. We couldn't actually do this back then at all. Imagine this concept back then. It's like, I'm going to be on the computer talking to you and then that, and then, and we were all looking at the first computers that had the phone line into it, the dial up and all that kind
modem.
of stuff. So, the modem. The modem. I forgot about the
all
modem.
The green letters.
I remember.
As a finisher here, you said that you did a lot of research on Central Park. One of the things you already shared with me that is actually a man-made park compared to like a piece of area that was blocked off and then called a park. You know what I mean?
I would have said that too. Thought that too.
Yeah.
Like
so what did you learn about that? What was the initial why did they even do the park right there in the middle of a city that time or is so tight with space? As you said, most people live in very, very small apartments, and there's just this amazing park. I was wondering if in your historical research you saw any reason why that happened.
In the middle of the 19th century, so we're talking the 1850s in New York, the city, Manhattan in particular, had just exploded in population. There were immigrants moving in through Ellis Island all the time. And this
Right.
is also the period in which you find New York's famous tenements.
Uh-huh.
Dirty, cramped apartments. One's options at the time for going out and socializing included like saloons and brothels and like bathhouses that had their own bad reputation. And so there weren't healthy places for New Yorkers to go. And so I really love 19th century New York politicians and businessmen for deciding that New York needed a major green space. Also, there's a sort of rivalry between the nations. And so in Europe, there were famous large parks like Versailles, for
Oh,
example, in France, and America wanted to have its own big national park. And
gotcha.
so it was for altruistic motives that the politicians and the businessmen decided to set this 50 blocks of New York aside to be a park. And I
Yeah.
mean, certainly, like imagine, like Manhattan real estate's so expensive and it just keeps going up and up and up. They sacrificed all that potential in terms of, real estate sales for a public park.
50
And so
blocks. Wow.
it goes for 51 blocks to be precise. From
Wow.
north to south. It's a little narrower in the middle. It goes for a half mile in the middle. And so there was a competition in the 1850s for landscape architects to come up with plans for the park. And eventually the gentleman who won, Frederick Olmsted, he'd had other experience in the past with landscape architecture, came up with it. And then it was a major employer in the 1850s and 1860s, in that a lot of recent immigrants found work landscaping the park. There was a lot of
Oh,
dynamiting rocks out. Some of it was marshy, like mosquito breeding land that had
yeah.
to be drained by like 19th century pumps and pipes
Yeah.
in order to recover the land. And so there's a lot of fascinating history. If I can bring it up in the park, I don't know. Yeah, it'd be a bit more time. There actually was a whole suburb north of southern Manhattan, in the area in the northwest corner of what's the park now, called
Okay.
Seneca Village. It was a suburb before there were the suburbs. And it's remarkable because it's pre-Civil War in New York. And New York
Oh, wow.
was a free state and not a slave state. But there were a fair number, I mean, a large community of African American landowners, property owners in Seneca Village.
Really?
And eventually the city did buy them out. It was generous again. It bought out with eminent domain. And now that's
Uh,
green space. But it's fascinating to me that real homes where real people lived
uh-huh.
were eventually had
Sacrifice.
to be sacrificed, for this artificial public park.
Right.
And so, the history is endlessly fascinating to me. I'm still learning
Yeah.
about it. There's Seneca Village. Yes.
And the history of the park. I mean, if you just crack the door in your mind to, all right, so you're talking mid 1900s, 1850, whatever it is. Imagine like what was going on. And like the idea that we get to walk through it now and all these other people have walked through it in the past. It's pretty remarkable, the idea of you know, no cars at one point, horse and buggy, that kind of deal. Moving into, vehicles around New York City, the slow ones, and then moving on. I don't know. It's just really neat, really, really neat, and lots of history to learn. But Aaron, I really, really appreciate you coming on. I think you've given us some tools for the tool belt. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. Let's say the name of your book one more time and where people can find it. Go ahead.
The book is called Four Walks in Central Park, and you can find it everywhere. It's on Amazon. It's sold at Barnes and Noble. It's shelved in the tour guide section, in the New York tour guide section instead of the poetry section.
Very cool. So anyone out there, run out there and grab it. Let's learn about some forest bathing. It's obviously helped people throughout history. It looks like it started in Japan. Now Aaron's teaching us how to do it. So I'm going to take it more serious now when I go for a walk in the park, with my nephew. to try to connect. You know what I mean? Like take the time, touch the tree, touch the leaf, you feel the ground, that sort of stuff, and try to get to the present moment. And that's where we can kind of be most present and do the most work. Again, Aaron, I super appreciate you coming on. If there's anything we can do for you in the future, please let us know. And besides that, buddy, thank you so much. And
Pleasure to meet you.
Yes, thank you.
Pleasure to
I've
hear your
really
stories.
enjoyed speaking with you, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your stories as well.
Awesome. It helps us to do it and be accountability partners to each other. And if one person out there hears it and it helps them get through a day, then it's all worth it.
yeah. And if you're honestly talking about trying to get better and like recover from something, and a lot of people think, you know, especially me, you know, I dived straight into alcohol and it just got really bad. And I was so defined by it too. And hearing people talk about different tools they used and the camaraderie there is knowing that other people are suffering, which sounds weird, but it means you're not alone. It's awesome. So you being vulnerable, you sharing the tools, you putting it on paper and putting it in front of a publisher, congratulations. You know what I mean? That's like a home run right there, just putting pen to paper.
I've enjoyed myself very much. I'm glad I learned about this show. I'll become a fan for some of the reasons I was talking about earlier. Like I've gone from the one extreme of believing that my misery was unique and nobody else could share it. And now I've gone to the other extreme where I want to hear everyone's stories and see, what in that applies to me, and what I can use.
Yeah, exactly. You could still learn from it. Like you said, I'm a work in progress. So every time I learn something, like I just learned today, I'm going to take it more serious when I'm doing it. So I really appreciate it. And you just got to, eventually you get to a point where at first I was a victim. I didn't want your help. I don't need your help. You don't know me. You don't know what I'm going through. Go screw yourself, that sort of thing. And then to get better, you learn that you have to start listening to other people, or you have to kind of, start reading and pushing yourself to grow and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we are stronger together for sure. And a lot of people are embarrassed about things like addiction, but they really shouldn't be. It's just a signal that you were going through something super stressful. And then, you found something that alleviated that pain. It's not, I mean, you can't really chastise someone who's living in pain on a daily basis, whether it be emotional, physical, or mental, and they find something that helps. I know alcohol did that for me. It just kept being my daily button. I got to hit this and I hit this. And I really liked what you said about the idea that like, at first you're like, oh, this actually makes me better. You know what I mean? This optimizes what I'm going through. Then you said, I think something, I forgot the second one, but then eventually when you think about it, it makes you cry, because you've gone full cycle. One is like, I'm going to try this. Oh, it's really working. It's really working. And then you kind of go into isolation because you're like worried about what people are. I did the same thing, worried about people or what they're going to say. What have I become? And I'm thinking for them too. No one's saying this stuff to me. And then eventually you can't live with it and you can't live without it. And it becomes a centerpiece of your day. If something's exciting, I'll have a drink. If something's sad, I'll have a drink. If a call went really well, let's have a drink. If it didn't go well, let's have a drink. So it's funny how your brain can guide that story always to the same end, which you hit on so well. Thank you. That was really, really well said.
Thank you.
You have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, reach out to us if you need anything, or if you got a new story you want to share, feel free. Okay.
I'll let you know. Thank you very much. Okay. You guys have a good afternoon. Thank you again.
Too.
Thanks for listening to Shit Creek Survivors, where we share stories of resilience and the tools to build it. If this episode inspired you, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Every follow helps us grow and reach more survivors out there. So until next time, keep going, keep growing, and remember, you are not alone out there.